Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good evening, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Democracy, a doctrine most defined and redefined by scholars, used and misused by politicians, celebrated and abused through the test of time as written in history. The debate never stops, from Plato, whose disdain has defined democracy as a matter of opinion over the mighty knowledge, to the French philosopher de Tocqueville, who recognized the inevitability of democracy, but still he warned us against the tyranny of the majority. Leaders and thinkers too have made the noun democracy to sometimes sound promiscuous, casting aspersions, rendering it to be purely rhetorical. Sukarno's guided democracy, El Jefe with his new democracy, Franco with his organic democracy, to name just a few. But if at all we are about to learn anything from the French Revolution, Oliver Holmes' sarcasm was not far off the mark. Democracy is what the crowd wants. Are we hearing this? Where do we now stand, democratically speaking? To know where we are, we must know where we came from. Democracy in Malaysia has had its roots since 1867, with the establishment of the Straits Settlement Legislative Council following its jurisdictional transfer from the English East India Company to the Colonial Office, the first office of its kind to hold debates and discussions on affairs of its member state. The Council showed characteristics of a modern parliament. But the birth of our modern democracy only truly began during the post-Japanese occupation period, which culminated into our fight for independence and subsequently the formation of Malaysia in 1963. The Cobalt Commission, that played a huge role in laying the foundations of a democracy, was in fact part of the democratic process. In trying to understand our democracy, learning about its birth is not enough. As citizens of Malaysia, we must learn about the system in its infancy, its teething pain, what ails democracy today, and how do we go about restoring the faith in the democracy again. We are a federal constitutional monarchy. It has a parliamentary system of government headed by a prime minister, selected through periodic multi-party elections. The federal constitution was legislated to help bring into existence the conditions for the system to exist. The separation of the administrative powers into three parts, which are the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive, is one such condition. In 1963, during the formation of Malaysia, the Malayan Parliament was adopted as the Parliament of Malaysia. When Singapore left in 1965, their legislative assembly became their parliament, and it ceased to be the Parliament of Malaysia. Much of what I have said is now part of our history, and it's upon us to learn about our democracy. But it wasn't all sunshine for Malaysia. Our democracy saw the suspension of Parliament from the year 1969 to 1971 in the aftermath of the May 13 riot. The National Operation Council, NOC, was convened right after the declaration of emergency and the suspension of Parliament in 1969. George Bernard Shaw once said, "If history repeats itself and the unexpected always happen, how incapable must a man be in learning from history?" Today, we are living through another suspension of Parliament. Justified or not, only time will tell. But one thing is for sure, the powers that be have shown us how incapable men are at learning from history. If 2 suspensions weren't enough, time has a way of testing our infantile democracy yet again through the 1988 judicial crisis. This was when the then Prime Minister wrestled the power of the judiciary away from its rightful owner, the judicial branch. Then on, the head of government at that time began discharging justice on his own, thereby becoming his own judge, jury, and executioner. On the trials that our democracy has weathered, none has been as challenging as the recent Sheraton move, a move that invited the question of legitimacy of a sitting government. And it doesn't stop at that. While it is allowed by the provisions of the Federal Constitution, the morality of such a move continues to be questioned. Let me make it clear, and this is a very important point, that we, UMNO and Barisan Nasional, our position was unambiguous. We wanted Parliament to be dissolved in order to return the mandate to the rakyat, to the people. However, the rulers refused. So we were left with no option but to support the current government for 1 year with the condition that at the expiration of the stipulated time, a fresh election must be held. But since the current government has failed to honor this 1 year condition, we're now left with a tyranny of the minority as Parliament cannot be dissolved during the current state of emergency. Make no mistake, Malaysia is the only country in the world that has suspended Parliament and suspended the Constitution with the excuse that we need to fight COVID. To make matter worse, the current government gave the excuse that there are too many old people in Parliament, not sure whether it includes me, to refuse holding Parliament sessions despite the young Di-Pertuan Agong declaring that Parliament can resume during the emergency. As the English would say, bollocks. The Sheraton move saw a number of people, under the guise of saving the country and upholding democracy, leaving their parties and declaring support for the formation of the current government. Party hopping, while legally permissible, opened the Pandora's box with a question: should one be able to do something that is legally permissible while knowing that it's morally questionable? Make no mistake, UMNO and BN was part of that move as well. However, UMNO was not guided by the idea of preserving power and influence. I have, even through the electoral defeat of 2018, maintained that democracy is only as strong as its actors. That also means that one should always be ready to accept defeat and exit gracefully. One can't say one believes in democracy, yet be ready to do whatever it takes to remain in power. Earlier, I quoted Plato, whose disdain has defined democracy as a matter of opinion over the mighty knowledge. Therefore, I am forced to agree that the current democracy in this country is flawed. Democracy can truly live up to its meaning for as long as we give the voters accurate information and not be inundated by propaganda and untruth spread by political agents or even by politicians themselves. Prior to GE14, the voters were misled with slews of misinformation and lies. For example, until today, those that accuse and oppose me have never dared confirm publicly that the 2.6 billion in my account was subsequently returned to the sender 4 months later, and that at least 642 million was received directly from the Saudi Arabia Ministry of Finance bank account, as was revealed repeatedly in court. I was also accused of killing Altan Tuya and Kevin Moraes, and probably a few more. My wife was accused of buying a pink diamond. The country is bankrupt, and that GST is an evil taxation system. But all these two were already subsequently proven untrue in the courts and in Parliament. But none of this was ever explained